Hello, everyone. Welcome to AVAIYA University's Healing from Childhood Trauma. I am Ande Anderson. My partner, Ike Allen, and I are the founders of AVAIYA University and Enlightenment Village. Thanks so much for being here. And in this event, we're talking with some really great fellow experts. We're talking with psychologists, with therapists, with body workers, with doctors, authors, and more about how to help you heal from your experiences of childhood trauma. And together, we're sharing with you lots of strategies and tools and tips to help you learn to love yourself, let go of your past, and live a peaceful, powerful life. Today, our guest is going to talk about how trauma does not have to be a life sentence for children. So please, everyone, welcome Dave Berger. Hi, Dave.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks for being here. And I want to tell everyone a little bit about you and the work that you're up to in the world, and then we'll dive into some questions. So Dave is senior faculty with the Somatic Experiencing Trauma Institute. He teaches all levels of the SE training. He's also part of Dr. Peter Levine's initial legacy faculty, being mentored by Dr. Levine to teach SE masterclasses. And Dave's own BASE, which stands for Bodywork and Somatic Education Training for Trauma Therapists, is an integration of his decades of work in behavioral and physical health. As a therapist, teacher, consultant, and mentor, Dave's passion and commitment to deep healing guide his work. Now there's about a million other things I could tell you guys about Dave, but I'm going to dive into questions. So Dave, let's just start off with, what is trauma? What is your definition of trauma?
What is trauma? Typically, historically, trauma has been considered the events, the experiences that we've had. And to some extent, there's accuracy in that there are some kind of traumatic events that most everybody will respond to physically, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. But ultimately, it's more of a response that we have rather than an event. So it's our physiological response to overwhelming circumstances. How do we define overwhelm? In many ways, that's individual dependent. So what one person would consider overwhelming, and this is not a cognitive, conscious consideration generally. It's more of a non-conscious, automatic response to overwhelm. Another person may not. Two people, for example, might be standing on a street corner, having a nice conversation. It's a nice day out. They both hear the loud screech of brakes. And one person gets very, very aroused, but doesn't know what to do. The other person just kind of sort of looks and determines, oh, that car is far enough away from us. So they have different individualized responses to things mostly external to their body. If it's an illness or injury, it's internal, but it's external. And it's in that response where we can succeed or get stuck in completing what we would call survival responses. So ultimately, the way we look at trauma is through the lens of a physiological, biological, spiritual, psychological response to events, not so much the event itself. Mm-hmm. Although, as I said, some events generalize to most everybody.
Got it. Okay, awesome. Thank you for the overview and getting us started with that. So now let's dive into specifically childhood trauma. So how does being traumatized while being a child differ from if you experience some kind of trauma as an adult?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for children, childhood trauma, depending on the kinds of trauma, are experiences where we may expect most children under like circumstances can get traumatized. If you think about the needs of a child from in utero through 2, 3, 4 years old, they're reliant upon adults for pretty much everything, except basic physiological functions, breathing, heart rate, blood flow, digestion, etc. But everything else requires an adult getting nurtured, nutrition, being held, sleep-wake cycles are supported by the adult, hopefully. And how that's navigated by adults and in the relationship with a child, with an infant particularly, to infant and toddler, determines whether or not the child will become self-soothing, self-regulating, being able to manage eventually on their own the ups and downs that we all have in life. Now, for an infant, ups and downs might simply mean my body's hungry, feed me. Right? And if they get fed, wonderful. If they don't, okay, it might be manageable for a little bit of time, a couple of times, but over a series or prolonged exposure to not receiving their basic needs met, including being held, then their physiological response and their brain's involvement with the physiological response can result in what we might call dysregulation. If we pull out the word trauma and replace it with dysregulation, what we're talking about really is the functioning of the nervous system, of the brain, the master operator of everything else that goes on in our body, to manage these ups and downs, these cycles, and the like. That gets dysregulated. So the infant, soon to be toddler, can't, at a neurophysiological level, manage through these stressors, the physiological stressors, stress responses. Under healthy circumstances, the brain develops and matures to be able to do that, to self-soothe, self-regulate, interact with others and all. But when we don't get our needs met, then the nervous system, the brain, doesn't go in that direction. It doesn't learn how to self-soothe, or self-regulate. And that would be at the root of what would otherwise be called a trauma response. So it's a neurophysiological response to, for an infant, being held, nurtured, and fed is a requirement. When we don't get that, or don't get that sufficiently or efficiently, that's overwhelm due to the underwhelm or the under-receiving needs, right? And that's an overwhelm for a child.
Got it. So like if someone grows up based on this and doesn't know how to self-soothe, how does that manifest in adulthood? Like what kind, for our viewers right now, like what does that look like when we're adults if we didn't learn that?
Yeah. Well, and again, the learning is from bottom up. The learning is a physiological body experience, not a top-down cognitive function. It can look like a number of different things depending on the individual, depending on the severity, depending on the circumstances that child grows up in and migrates to, involves him or herself with, itself with over time. And how much support it has later on in life too. One of the nice things for viewers to think about is that because it's a response, that we're responding to something. It's a verb. It's not the event. It's not a noun. Responses are changeable. And this is why we consider trauma not a life sentence. Our physiological, neurological, relational responses can change. Whereas an event is an event. It's already taken place. That's not changeable. Our responses to it are. So someone may grow up, let's say they have been exposed to a household where there's a lot of chaos or domestic violence or even neglect. Neglect is even more severe. They may grow up and be hypervigilant to loud sounds or hypervigilant to relational dynamics, but may not know it. And what's interesting is that, let's take relational dynamics. What's interesting is that we find our way into relational dynamics, relationships that are most similar to what we already know. Now, we don't necessarily cognitively know that, but we, in a non-conscious way, know that. And so we find our way into those relationships and those kinds of relationships that are similar enough to what we grew up in.
Right.
If they're great and healthy and wonderful, great. If they're not, it gives us another opportunity to rework it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So, right. So if we didn't learn to self-soothe, one of the things that can affect us later in life is, yes, kind of attracting that same kind of relationship. We talk about marrying your mother or your father, or being in relationship with that same kind of style or person or whatever. And I love too that you talk about learning is from the, did you say the bottom up, right?
That's
The
right.
body up.
Exactly. The body up. The body up. Much learning and much of the way we relate with the world is from the body up. It's not all, in fact, much of it is from the body up. Very little of it is from the top down. Now, we do think through things, and we're as rational as we can be. We are cognitive. Those are all vitally important functions. But when it comes to urgency or the agency to function, when it comes to natural, quick, innate responses, that's all body up.
Got it. So, okay, so let's dive into somatic experiencing. Speaking of the body up. So like, first of all, what is it? What is somatic experiencing for those people who don't know the term, and how can it help people address trauma?
Yeah. Well, in its essence, I've just described it.
Okay.
Described the theory, the philosophy, the ideas behind it. Dr. Peter Levine, who developed somatic experiencing really from the late 60s through the 70s and 80s, looked at how the nervous system functions and saw that in many ways we as humans, as human animals, function similarly to animals, to other animals, primarily mammals, but other animals in general. And noted that animals in the wild generally tend to not get traumatized, whereas humans very well may. And so he started looking at the two and applied what he was noticing in animals to humans. Mm. And there's a cycle when confronted with threat or mortal threat that animals go to. In somatic experiencing, we call it a threat response cycle, survival response cycle, that allows for all this energy to get expressed through running and fighting and even going into a shutdown state when there's mortal threat, and really leave their bodies in a certain way. They completely go immobilized. And what that does is lets the predator know, you smell me, you're not going to smell anything. I'm not moving. I'm essentially dead, or I'm pretending I'm dead. I'm feigning death. And then I come back out of it. And after the fight, after the flight, after this shutdown state, you'll notice an animal will shake and tremor. And really what it's doing is discharging the biochemistry of all of that survival energy having succeeded. And by releasing that energy and mobilizing itself again when the coast is clear, when there's safety, it allows for the animal just to continue on. And it notes at a not cognitive level what is safe and what is not safe, where is safe, where is not safe. Mm. And so applying that concept, those concepts to human animals, Dr. Levine noted, there are things in humans that get in the way of us completing those cycles. What gets in the way is sometimes we have to think our way through things. It doesn't allow for the natural biological completion, like having to fill out, little paperwork or explain things when we're in a car accident, for example, or things go on and on and on. So for a child growing up in a chaotic household, they can't let their bodies shake or tremor completely. They're not consoled in the way that their own being needs. And in response to that, and when it goes over again and on again and over again and on again, they begin to shut down parts of themselves in order to, it's similar, not quite the same, but similar to the animal that goes into that death-like state, energy conservation state. Is all that survival energy gets held in one way, shape, or form physiologically in their bodies. Mm-hmm. And in somatic experiencing, there are ways that we gradually, in a very manageable, what we call titrated way, little by little, modulated way, support a client's system, their physiological, emotional, spiritual, psychological systems, to move through the incomplete responses that from, could be from yesterday, it could be from 40 years ago, so that they can complete that response and feel really re-inhabit, or perhaps embody for the first time a more regulated self.
Hi there, this is Ike Allen, founder of AVAIYA. I wanted to take a moment and pause the Masterclass to remind you that you can experience many more teachers in the free Masterclass at avaiya.com/healing. That's AVAIYA.com/healing. If you're not currently subscribed for the Masterclass, please do so now so you can experience all the available classes in this exciting series. And now, back to the Masterclass.
Wow, all that is just so amazing to me. I love talking about like our bodies being this really sentient being that has its own wisdom, and just like I just love that. I had never thought about the animal connection too, and really dove deep into how Peter had started his work around it. It's just amazing to think, right, that we have these minds that can get in the way for whatever reason, like you said, right? We have to fill out the paperwork, we have to deal with something, so we can't process the car accident we just had, or we delay it. But yeah, so what are the ways that people can utilize somatic experiencing? Like, could you give an example of like an exercise or something that people can do to start, gradually releasing that survival energy?
Yeah, there are a few things people can do on their own, and having someone witness them and facilitate it is also really important. To see an SE practitioner, because when we get to a like situation, and what I mean by like physiologically, the similar enough psychophysiological state as when X, Y, or Z happened, we'll do the same thing that we always do because we survived. I mean, literally survived. If we survived, we must have done something right. We did something right. We'll do it again. That's like, I got to the grocery store. I'll just go the same route I always go.
Right.
Get in that sort of, routine. But there are some things that people can do to help as a beginning. For example, when someone is feeling themselves get a little bit overwhelmed, like the O of the word overwhelmed, not the whole thing, just beginning. Maybe their muscle tension increases a little bit, or they notice their breath is a little bit short, or they're starting to tighten up. Just looking around the room, looking for objects or pictures that are pleasant to their eyes, that their eyes would like to see. And then even cognitively reminding themselves, I'm right here in this moment right now. I'm not there then.
Mm-hmm.
That's really important, because we automatically, non-consciously get transported, and we're not even aware of it, but our body's responding. Now, a lot of circumstances, we're in it. It's not a then, but it's a now and then. But even that reminder, oh, I can look at that picture and feel 10% better.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
That's really important. Another exercise is to exhale more completely. And there are certain ways we do that, but the exhalation is the most important part of breathing. Full exhalation stimulates the natural inhalation.
Got it.
Exhaling all the way.
Mm-hmm.
Wait a moment.
Just saying that right now, I'm sure everyone's doing the same thing, right?
I saw that. Your whole face relaxed a little bit.
Yeah.
There's another thing that people can do, and this is more from my work, not somatic experiencing, although I bring it into the SE world a lot, which is just to allow your tongue to soften. This is a technique I have learned to borrow from somebody else and have adapted it. If you allow your tongue to soften, you may notice what happens through the rest of your body.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Your breathing softens, your belly relaxes, and on down. And like that. It's changing right now.
Yeah.
And when we allow and it's, other people don't even notice it, right? But when we allow our bodies to soften just a little bit, we literally have more flexibility. And if we're in the stew of chaos, or we start thinking about the argument that my parents had when I was visiting at the family dinner recently, it reminds me of back then. We just soften a little bit. It can shift our relationship to the dynamics that we're thinking about or that we're in the middle of. And it's about our internal dynamics responding to. It's not about the external dynamics. Those are the trigger.
Got it. I love that. That is just all so good. What you said about the tongue reminded me, I was taking a yoga class the other day, and I've been doing yoga for years, but no teacher had ever said this before. We were in like meditation, and she's like, if your tongue is on the roof of your mouth, just notice that, and try to drop your tongue off of the roof of your mouth, right? And I like just that like tiny little thing, I was like, wow, paying attention to something that specific was just this whole amazing experience of presence and letting go. And so I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah, and you could do it at the grocery store. Nobody knows.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, I'll teach this to children too. I'll use something like, you ever have peanut butter or almond butter or sunflower butter, and you know how they're stuck in your mouth? Well, imagine it all just dissolving, and feel your tongue just ooze to the floor of your mouth, right? Mm-hmm. And a child can do that. A child can do it in first grade. A child can do it at home. A child can do it anywhere. Now, they have to be of a certain age to understand it.
Right.
Infants do it naturally. They soften their tongues when they're ready to sleep. Mm-hmm. Right? And it's very simple. Yes. Looking around, what would my eyes like to see right now that's more settling to my eyes than what my ears are hearing, as an example.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your specific work called BASE. So this was, again, body work and somatic education. So you do this, you've created this program for trauma practitioners, is that correct?
Yeah. So in addition to the SE trainings, I've developed this, and it's for practitioners who do body work, psychotherapists who want to add more detailed touch to their practices. So there are sort of two main columns of intent with BASE work. One is for practitioners to get very refined in their ability to know what's happening in clients' bodies, not just their overall general breathing, musculature, heart rate, etc. Those are really important, but organs, tissues, structures go into a dysregulated state, as well as the whole overall nervous system. So this is a way to listen with hands on to structures, organs, tissues in the body, connect with them through intention and touch, and support them in coming into a more regulated state. And when that happens, that allows a more fluid set of sensory information to go up to the brain and basically say, I'm okay, things are okay. You can come back into your body more fully. Mm-hmm. So it's about refining in SE, we call it tracking skills. In my work, we call it listening skills, listening with the hands, listening with your whole being to another person's physiological state. And so we work with a bunch of different structures in the body, and then also the whole body as a container for resilience. And then eventually bring that into couples work, somatic couples work. Mm. The other major column that's supported in this work is the relational and empathic connection or attunement with a client. So the more refined a practitioner is in connecting with a client's body, the greater attunement that they have. And attunement is so vitally important in the growth of an infant. The just knowing that I know, the knowing that I feel connected, and that I am connected with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a physiological conversation. It's not a verbal, I mean, there's play, there's verbal, but it's a physiological connection or communication, conversation that a parent and an infant have,
Mm-hmm.
and that a practitioner and a client can have. So the client knows that they know that I am connected with, and I'm lovable, and I'm likable, and I can like me. I can be within me at the same time. So it's a very refined touch. It's not a sexual or sensuous touch. It's a connected touch in that way. So there's a relational aspect of base and a hands-on detailed touch aspect of base that are intertwined.
Mm-hmm. So question based, pulling this back to our viewers again. So why is it that so many people, right, struggle with being in their bodies if they've had, right, childhood traumas?
Well, if bad things happen, why would I want to feel it? It's basic. It's really a very simple question and an extremely complex response. So if bad things happen, and for an infant, a bad thing might also be what I needed didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
I respond, infants, children, adolescents, we all, humans, just like animals, respond with a stress response. And the stress response is meant to help us attend to the outside world. Is it safe? Is it not safe? And then go from there. If it's safe, great, I can let down. If it's not safe, then I need to do something to survive. Part of the survival strategy, if it's going to feel bad, is a whole biochemistry that supports us not feeling. There's increased catecholamine and adrenaline, endorphins. I can list several different things, and that quite literally is designed for us to not feel our bodies, to not be in our bodies, so we leave our bodies until it's safe to come back in.
Right.
And so it's a physiological, spiritual, psychological response, so we don't feel. In the wilds, animals do the same thing. We'll see an animal go into this shutdown state, and animals don't feel, and we don't also. We dissociate or leave our bodies before the teeth grabs the prey's muscles, skin. They don't feel it. Well, we do the same thing. We even do it to emotional threat. We respond the exact same way. It doesn't have to be physical threat where there's physical pain, but emotional pain, it's the same process.
Hi, it's Ike again. I wanted to remind you once more that you can experience many more teachers in our free masterclass at AVAIYA.com/healing. That's AVAIYA.com/healing. If you're not currently subscribed for the masterclass, please do so now so you can experience all the available classes in this exciting series. And now, back to the masterclass.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, when I was asking that, it does, right, it is so simple, and yet, this is something people are taking with them. They're potentially most of their lives, and might be coming right now to be like, why is it that I can't, get back into my body, get back into feeling sensations and emotions and all of that. So as we wind down on time, I do want to also mention that there is a button below this video right now that takes you over to Dave's website. And I know that you have resources and a newsletter that they can sign up for if they want to learn more. Can you just share a little bit about what you give people in your newsletter?
Well, there are a number of articles there about the work that I do, different kind of circumstances, examples of working with clients, those sorts of things. So you get a bit larger of a flavor of what BASE is, the basic training, some of the specialty workshops. You get a flavor of how a BASE is applied in various different circumstances, different situations as well. Like I have a specialty workshop in concussions and post-traumatic stress disorder, because there's a deep overlap there. Another one with my friend, actually you've interviewed Abby Blakeslee in the past.
Yep.
We have a workshop together on somatic couples work, relational dynamics. So you'll get a lot more there about me and my background as well.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yes, we had Abby on our last event around breaking free from abandonment issues. So she was amazing, and pretty much everyone I get to talk to from Somatic Experiencing is just awesome. I love all the work that you guys are doing, and specifically what you do in the body and all that stuff as well is amazing. So, are there any last insights? Anything else you want to add to this conversation before we hop off?
Just to leave viewers with the understanding that trauma is not a life sentence, and that's a quote from Peter Levine, that it's changeable. The responses, how you've lived your life, is not a life sentence. Things are changeable.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. Thank you for being here and doing this and all the work that you do to help people in the world.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, and you're most welcome.
My pleasure. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning into this latest class with Dave Berger. And please go check out his work. Again, the button is below if you want to learn more about his work, read articles, get some more resources. And we will see you on the next one, everybody. Here is to your journey to healing from childhood trauma. Bye, everybody. Hey everyone, I just wrapped up an amazing class with Dave Berger. He talked with us about how trauma does not have to be a life sentence for children. I love Dave's talk. I love diving into the conversation of somatics, of somatic experiencing, somatic healing. And we've had, if you've been paying attention to AVAIYA University, we've also had other people from Dr. Peter Levine's Somatic Experiencing organization on our past events, like Overcoming Codependency and Breaking Free from Abandonment and Betrayal. And they all dive into this conversation of somatic experiencing, right? Talking about how we learn from the body up, right? We learn responses, and all of this stuff is happening in our body when we are reacting to our environment as children. And we often take that learning and that survival mechanism into our adulthood. So, right, if we had a horrible traumatic experience as a child, or many of them, our bodies survived that. So our bodies continue to do the same things in our adult life because it's all about survival ultimately. So one of the really big take-home messages was that responses are changeable, right? Like he mentioned, childhood trauma is not a life sentence. Responses are changeable. There are things that you can do to change your responses and to work with your body in releasing what he talked about as this like survival energy. He talked about this really amazing story of how Dr. Peter Levine had, started looking at animals and how they have different have responses to trauma in their life, right? They could be about to be eaten by the saber-toothed tiger, but then how they release that survival energy afterwards, and they don't, right? They move completely through these responses. Unlike us, our sometimes intellectual minds get in the way of us moving through these physical somatic body responses, so that we carry them, carry this baggage with us throughout our life. So a couple of exercises that Dave recommended are, if right when you're starting to get overwhelmed, like you're starting to, like he mentioned, the O of overwhelm. So right in the beginning, if you start feeling a response in your body to some kind of external trigger, start looking around you, looking for objects that are pleasant to you, looking around your room, things that you can focus in on that remind you to be present in this moment, remind you that here you are, right? Safe in your room, safe in your office, safe wherever you are, out walking in the woods. You're not back in the past where your body might think it is. So another recommendation he had was to exhale more completely, right? He mentioned that was the most important part of the breath, is to exhale. So these are just a couple of really great exercises you could start taking on for yourself, in addition to working with a somatic experiencing practitioner or someone else that you're interested in working with to help you on your journey. So I hope you enjoyed this latest class, and we will see you on the next one. Thanks, everybody.